Hello, everyone out there. Thank you so much for joining us for this conversation, which I am anticipating being absolutely fantastic. And I want to welcome you to today's conversation on next level leading. And so, my name is Rhonda Williams. I'm an elite leadership coach. I focus on helping leaders to really redefine excellence to include effectiveness, well balance, and total well being. So, that's my story. I'm passionate. I've been helping leaders for many, many years really get from the life they're living to a life they're loving. And today, joining me in this conversation are two of my new favorite people that I have met on LinkedIn. If you all could just see some of our conversations, you'd be excited about this as well. So I'm going to toss it first to the wonderful Paulette Dale. And welcome. Thank you so much for being here, and introduce yourself.
Thank you, Rhonda. And it's a joy to finally meet you in person. Hi, everybody. I'm Paulette Dale, and my passion is empowering people, mainly women, but men also, to speak up for themselves, to be assertive, to stop kicking themselves for what they should have said, to help rectify conflicts by communicating assertively and respectfully and politely, by setting boundaries, saying no to inconvenient or unreasonable requests. So the more we empower ourselves to be confident and to be assertive, the better leaders we will be when we're given that opportunity. So thank you. Back to you, Rhonda.
Absolutely. And, in the short time that we've known each other, I've already learned so much from you. And so I am bringing all of that wisdom, and I am so grateful that you're here to share that with others as well today. And to my other new favorite person, welcome. So great to see you again, Patrick. Introduce yourself.
My pleasure, Rhonda. I'm really thrilled to be on this show with you and Paulette. I'm a recovering lawyer, perhaps a misguided mediator. I spread the word that conflict isn't positive like people have been telling us for years that it is. And what I'm really trying to do is to shift our culture from the divisive debate stream of conversations that we see these days to collaborative conversations. We need to shift the conversation so that we can prevent conflict before it ever begins.
Thank you, Patrick. I love the idea of more collaborative conversations. One of the reasons I wanted to bring you both together for this conversation today is because leaders are dealing with a lot today, right? And just in our world in general, there's a lot happening for leaders. And so as we think about what the leaders are dealing with today, I thought, the three of us frequently talk about certain skill sets.
Yes.
And so let's bring those into the conversation as we go forward today. I wanted to start by talking about how leaders can use some of the skills that we're going to touch on to really improve their effectiveness and to also be sure that they feel good in the process. We can't leave ourselves out of this equation. A part of the work that we do involves us feeling good about that work as well.
Yes.
I want to start by asking you all to talk to me a little bit about self-leadership. When we talk about leadership, we are typically focused outward. I want to turn the conversation inward for a moment. What does it mean to have self-leadership, particularly in today's time? So, Paulette, I want to come to you first, ask you to talk a little bit about self-leadership.
Sure. Self-leadership, I believe, happens when we are intrinsically motivated. Our motivation for what we do is coming internally, not externally. Intrinsic motivation is when we do what we do because we love it, because it gives us pleasure, because we enjoy it. We do it for the sheer pleasure of doing it. Extrinsic motivators, of course, there's nothing wrong with being extrinsically motivated. We can be externally motivated for financial gain, for fame, for recognition, etc. And we do need some of that, but I believe the best leaders are those that are intrinsically motivated and want to be leaders because they want to make a difference and they want to empower their team members. So I think that's the best type of leadership, when you're a self-leader and you're intrinsically motivated more than extrinsically. Back to you.
Yeah, really great point. When you're intrinsically versus extrinsically motivated, both of those have value. They
Yes.
both bring something to the table, but intrinsic motivation tends to be, it's what I call the thing that really powers the engine, that really
Yes.
keeps things going and moving. So I often think of extrinsic motivation as getting you to the party, but intrinsic motivation is going to get you the dance, right? It's going to get you on the dance floor and really get you moving. So that's how I think of those two. So Patrick, what would you add about intrinsic and extrinsic and basically self-leadership?
Thank you. What comes to my mind is that very few in leadership roles have absolute autonomy to be really activated entirely intrinsically. There's extrinsic motivation as a companion. So it's hard to have just the one. And what I'm thinking about, Rhonda, when I was listening to Paulette, was about change. Mm-hmm. So often leaders have to figure out, how am I going to lead a change that I didn't start? It wasn't my idea. And then when you come into so intrinsically, yes, I have to own the change at some point, and I have to take care. I have to bring myself to align with it. Or as a speaker said to us once, that you have to cognitively reframe it until you can fit your role within the change, even if it isn't the change that you would have led or the direction that you want to go to. I'm interested in what Paulette was saying about that piece of self-care and finding your intrinsic motivation when that change isn't necessarily of your creation.
What do you think, Rhonda?
Well, so I'm thinking about this, right? Great question. And I think regardless of whether it is internally motivated or externally motivated, in order to be effective at leading and navigating the change, it requires you to see the what's in it for you.
Yes.
You have to be able to connect with it in some way, shape, or form. So this change might be driven by the governing board. It may be COVID driven, maybe processes, policies, procedures. All of these things could be changing because we're in the state of flux right now. But what does it mean for me? And then what does it mean for my team to get on board with this? i.e., I've been traveling recently. It's difficult to travel these days. It's different traveling. Airports, restaurants don't have staff. It is just a really interesting place. Imagine having this job, you're working full time. All of a sudden now management says to you, I need you to tell the team that we will be cutting our hours to halftime. We don't have enough staff. We simply can't support it. Well, those that are there showing up, you know that they're going to react to that. As the leader, how do you present that change in a way that can allow your team to move forward in a healthy way? Doesn't mean they won't push back. Doesn't mean they won't get angry or upset, but you still got to move them. So how do you do that? So that's what comes forward for me, is being able to make that connection. I don't know, Paulette, what do you see?
Well, what I see is, you're right. What's in it for me? What's in it for them? Maybe what's in it for them is they don't lose their job completely. To reframe it that way. Clearly, this isn't something we would think of on the spur of the moment. We would hopefully plan this out and think about this. So Patrick's question is fantastic. When you are tasked with affecting a change that you did not propose or you don't buy into, yet it's your responsibility as a leader to help come about, the motivation won't be intrinsic for sure. It will be extrinsic, as you pointed out. What's in it for me? What on the outside? So we have to recognize we can't always get personal pleasure from many of the decisions we have to make happen. But I'm a leader to begin with because it gives me intrinsic motivation. But does that mean I'm always going to be thrilled with the tasks I have to do as a leader and my responsibilities? No. So in order for me to keep moving and going forward, I'm going to focus on the extrinsic motivators. What's in it for me? So you're right. And we always have to think of that. In order to persuade anybody of anything, as Patrick would know, as Patrick knows as a trial attorney, to get people to see your point of view, what's in it for them? And this has been a motivating factor throughout history, hasn't it?
That's true. And I think one of the things for all leaders, and comes to the point that you made, Paulette, that being a leader is important to you. There's a value in that for you, the challenge. And one of the intrinsic motivations that's always present is your growth during that period of leadership.
Yes.
Because it's a heck of a lot more difficult to grow and bring your team along with a change that you don't necessarily love, than one that you think was your idea and an absolute brainchild. So there's a lot more opportunity for growth in those situations. A lot more work to be done to make them happen, though.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that point, Patrick. And someone on LinkedIn who made a comment, and unfortunately it doesn't show their name, but they said, all great points. Agility in leadership is key. Absolutely. So I did a Mythbuster series. I'm doing this Mythbuster series for leaders. And I did one of the Mythbusters that talked about the importance of authenticity versus the importance of growth mindset. We all hear today, authenticity is critical. And I argue in the video, it is important, but it's not the most important thing. I can be authentically terrible. Okay. I think we just have to call that what it is. And so just showing up as your authentic self does not always mean that you are effective just because you're being authentic. My challenge to leaders is, do you have that growth mindset? Are you interested in learning and developing and evolving, particularly during times of crisis?
Yes.
So these points, I think, are really great. And it takes us to something that I want to bring into the conversation. Let's say you are in this place. You do have this change that's being driven externally, crisis, COVID, budget, whatever else happens. How important is it in how you communicate that message to the team? And I want to speak to both the aspect of assertive communication that you are such an expert in, Paulette, and also from the aspect, Patrick, of collaborative communication. How do I, as a leader, bring those two together to create an effective message for this change? Paulette, let's start with you.
Wow. Okay. Here's where, well, maybe it's authentic, maybe it isn't. Being open and direct, I was going to say honest, but if I'm not buying into it and I don't like it, I can't convey that because it will only increase the acrimony among the team members and it will only help encourage mutiny. Gee, if our leader is not embracing this, then why should we? So maybe I won't be able to be authentic. I might have to pretend. I might have to act as if and say that while I agree there's challenges and that there's some negatives, let's look at the positives and discuss that and be open and direct about why we have to do this, why it's better for us, and what's in it for us. And this isn't something I'm going to be able to do on the spur of the moment. It's going to take planning and preparation. And I would make sure that I have all my ducks in a row before I met with my team to discuss all of this. And then I would let them know that I want their feedback. And there will be grumbling, and I will validate their concerns, and I will validate their worries. And sometimes they just need to be heard, and they will embrace the change, however odious it is, if they feel they've been heard, if you've really listened to them to learn, as Patrick would say.
Mm.
So,
and are you listening to so that you can just get to your next point, or are you really hearing
yes,
what's being shared and what's being
that's
said?
right.
So I love that you said that you might have to pretend, you might have to get yourself there. You don't always buy in to everything, but I think there's a confidence, and let me know if you agree with this or not, but I think there is a level of confidence that a leader who is able to convey to their team, I don't quite get all of this, and I am not sure that I am completely on board with this, but we are a team, and here's what the team decided, and I want you all to help me move forward. How can we partner together to move forward? Do you agree with that?
100%. 100%. And you are qualifying it. You're not saying I'm completely against this and this is horrible and I don't know what we're going to do. And I'm with you. I'm not sure that this is the best way to go. I'm not happy about a lot of this, but since this is what we've been given to work with, let's work together as a team to make the best of this situation. Mm-hmm. So I absolutely do agree with you.
Yeah, that is a level 100%. Of confidence that is earned. I mean, leaders grow into that it's not always a natural thing. You learn to be more confident in your communication, and you learn to say, I don't have all the answers.
That's right.
I don't necessarily agree, but I am on the board because I am a part of this team. And as an organization, we're moving forward together. So Patrick, weigh in on this. What do you think?
I was listening to that and thinking, Patrick Lencioni talks about the idea of disagree and commit. And that comes to the point that Paulette was making, that when they felt heard and that you understand their concerns, then they can participate in the implementation of the change. They've been heard. It isn't how they would go. And okay, fine. I understand that's where we're going. What do you need me to do to help us get there? I think that's really important. I don't think you get that very often without actually being right up front, and that's part of that cognitive reframing of the change before you meet with your team, is how am I going to present this and what do I really think about it? And then finding a way to convey that's truthful without being a cheerleader necessarily for it. Because sometimes we do have to lead organizational change that is not how we would go. And I think it's important to tell them that this isn't necessarily how I would have chosen for us to be going right now. And it is the decision that has been made, and it is what we have to do. Let's figure out, given that, what can we do and what can I do to support you in order to move in that direction? It's kind of like that power of a positive no that I've talked about in some of the posts, that book of William Ury's. And I think it's important to be upfront, say, this isn't how I would have gone, and it is where we do have to go, where we are being directed to go. What do I need to do in order to earn your support, gain your support? What can we do, given that that's what we have to work with?
Yeah, I love that, because I do think, so this goes back to the authenticity part and being able to share I'm a little frustrated about this too. however, and then be able to move. I always call it the pivot point, right? Being able to convey who you are, where you are, but then being able to pivot. I think the challenge sometimes is as leaders, we get stuck there and we don't make the pivot. So now we're stuck and we're all doing this grumbling thing together, which is not probably very productive,
right,
and not very helpful. But that is going down. I view that sort of as down management. Let's talk about up management for a moment. You are that leader, that same leader. You've been placed in that same situation to deal with this change. You have really strong feelings. You disagree. You want to push back. You don't want to do that openly in the team. What does it take for that leader? What are the skills that come into play for the leader to then go into that executive's office, that president, that CEO, and say, I disagree with this? That feels like conflict, that feels uncomfortable. So talk to me about the communication skills, the confidence that's required for a leader to take that position.
okay. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that from a collaborative point of view, that's a matter of using the skills or using the collaborative model that I've introduced in the book, The Collaborative Path. So the first part for me in that situation is setting the environment or setting the parameters for the conversation. It's saying to the CEO, if that's who it is, I have concerns and I'd like to find a time to have a full conversation on them as part of leading this change so that I can be effective in the role. And when you do that, I think that you're conveying a couple of things. One is you're not coming in with guns blazing, and so you don't get a defensive reaction. And the second thing is that your interest, what you want, is to be an effective leader for the change. That's important to the CEO as much as it is to you. And if you can engage them on that basis, then they're willing to talk about this because you've just answered their what's in it for me. What's in it for them is your approach is to provide them with an effective leader. The second part for me, after setting the parameters and creating that atmosphere of openness and safety, would be to lay out your approach or your concerns as a perspective, not as an I know this is going to fail because type of thing. Rather, from my perspective and from that of the team, I see a variety of challenges with this, and I want to know how we have those covered off and where you're at on them before we take steps to actually implement the change. In having that conversation and in laying it out as a perspective, you get a greater level of engagement than you do by presenting it as pros and cons. And it opens the door to the idea that other elements or things could be done apart from just the A, B, C, and D that's been laid out in the change. I think we've all been through enough change to know that change is not as linear as it's presented by senior management when it's handed down to us. And presenting it as a perspective, I think enables us to have that conversation about where the flex is in the roadmap. That was the first things that went through my head.
Yeah, Paulette.
Okay, the first thing that went through my head is a bit similar. It made me think of Maslow's hierarchy of persuasion. Again, all goes back to what's in it for me. Need, attention, you got to get the person's attention, you got to show the need. And as a college professor who taught public speaking for 35 years, in my course on persuasion, I think some of those strategies would work perfectly. You go into the CEO's office with the strength of your convictions, because if you don't have them, you're not going to convey them. So first, you must have the strength of your convictions. You begin with building on areas of agreement. As Patrick pointed out, you don't go in there with guns blazing. This is the stupidest idea I ever heard. This is going to be detrimental. This is going to be disastrous. Build on areas of agreement. You know, Joe, you make some excellent points. It makes perfect sense that we need to cut the budget. We, have to increase our bottom line. Okay, so the first thing you're doing is making that individual see you as someone who's reasonable. You're agreeing with them. You're building on areas of agreement. They're going to be much more open to listening to and considering what you have to say if you could show them that you are somebody who has the same values and goals they have. Once you've established common ground, which is the technique, now it's time to hit them with your proposition, as we do in persuasion. That said, I must disagree with the way the company is proposing we go about this. And here's why. So you've got to go in there fully prepared. Sort of like when you're asking your boss for a raise, you just don't go in there and say, you should give me a raise because I need the money. No, you've got to have 3 compelling reasons. So do your preparation. They're listening to you. They're looking at you as someone who makes sense, who seems reasonable. You've already established common ground. Let's hear what she has to say. Let's see what she has to say, or he. So now you've got to hit them with your 3 compelling reasons, which will all go back to what's in it for the company if you do it my way. So that's sort of my focus, the techniques of persuasion.
Yeah, so the question that was coming forward as both you and Patrick were speaking is, do you need 2 things before those conversations can happen? Do you, number one, need self-awareness to understand where your emotional emotional state is? Where are you right now? And is this moment right now the time to have this conversation? Do I need to press the pause button? Do I need to think this out a bit? Often, I think without self-awareness, we just go emotionally charged and marching in, and sometimes that can not work in our favor. But number 2, I've talked to many leaders who will not go in that office. They will not have that conversation. And so I go back to having the confidence in your skill set and your ability to effectively communicate your message, whether or not you get what you want.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And if you don't get what you want, and if you are assertive and you have the strength of your convictions and you have the conversation and you don't get what you want, so be it. Assertive communication doesn't always work, but nothing always works. But you know what it always does? It always leaves you feeling better about yourself for having spoken up and expressing your views, and not ever having to say to yourself later, why am I such a coward? Why am I so submissive? What am I afraid of? So that's the biggest advantage. But yes, do know that it won't always work.
I love that. What I love about that, and then I want to get your thoughts on this also, Patrick. What I love about that is, like you said, nothing always works.
Right.
One of the phrases I heard one of the things I heard recently that I love is divorce yourself from the outcome. Divorce yourself from the result. There's something that you need to say that's important to you. You feel strongly about it. Developing that strength and confidence and passion to go forward and have that conversation, fully realizing nothing may change after this, but
right.
I will feel better. And we started our conversation, the 3 of us, with a part of this conversation about next level leading is increasing leader effectiveness, but also doing it in the way that leaders can walk away feeling good, feeling better about their skill set and what they bring to the table.
Yes.
So Patrick, we want to get your feedback on this also.
The other part that I like about that piece of feeling better is you're in so much better a position when you go back to your team, because you're able to say, yeah, right. I went in, I had the conversation, I've canvassed with you folks, we have laid out fully the arguments, the positions, that kind of stuff, the risks that we see, and I've had that conversation, and this is the response that I've gotten back. Given that that's the response that we've gotten back, now what are we going to do with it going forward? It really enhances your position in that regard to have had that conversation, as opposed to the people that you spoke about, Rhonda, that simply never wanted to go into the room.
That's right.
The other part that comes to my mind is, and I swear I'm not I do things besides read books.
You write them.
Wait, you mean books like these books?
Exactly. The 5 Paths to Persuasion. Have either of you seen that? For leaders, it's called the 5 Paths to Persuasion. I forget the author at the moment. It's a study of decision-making patterns of executives. So that is that CEO boardroom group, right? And you asked the question, Rhonda, about down. So about going up and having that conversation, I think it's really important to know what that CEO's decision-making style is, because what that book provides you with is the blueprint for how to present the argument to them, depending upon whether they're a charismatic, a thinker, a skeptic, and so on. And if you understand the 5 styles, then you have a much better chance of pitching your idea in a way that they will hear you.
Well, it goes back to, in public speaking, know your audience. Know your audience. So that's what Patrick is saying, basically. Know your audience, whether it's 1 or 1,000.
Yeah. And you own that. If you're the one that's going to have that conversation, you own, much like they say in communication, as much as it's a loop and there's a sender and a receiver, the sender has the primary responsibility for making sure that the message is received in the way they were intended. Now, they have no idea what white noise may lie in between, or what the other person's experience might have been in the past, but you own the way that you present and deliver the information. As a part of that is knowing the audience that you're speaking to. Someone on LinkedIn said, timing, assertive communication, and the strength of your conviction is an effective approach for tough conversations. This is such an engaging conversation. I really appreciate that, because all of those things are important, right? Timing, having the confidence, being assertive. Patrick, I want to go back to something you said a little while ago, because this came up when you were on the Coffee with Rhonda show, and your model of collaborative decision-making and shared decision-making, setting the parameters. One of the things that we talked about on the show is often we do not set parameters. We go in, we have an idea of our expectation, and we start going for it without deciding with the other person, how's this going to go? What happens if we disagree? Where's our stopping point? Talk to me a little bit more about setting the parameters and setting up the conversation for success.
Sure, thank you. The basis for step 1 of the collaborative model, set parameters, is the research from the Gottman Institute, Dr. John Gottman. His study of the relationship of marriage over decades revealed a pattern about how conversations go and which ones end successfully and which one ends poorly. What he noticed in his observations of couples having conversations in the Love Lab was that the conversations that ended well followed the pattern of talking first about how are we going to talk about what we're going to talk about, given that we're both emotionally charged about it. In setting the parameters, you talked, Rhonda, about that whole idea of going in there just emotionally charged and not self-aware enough of where you're at with the change. in setting the parameters, it enables you to work your way through that with the other person, who may also be quite emotionally charged for entirely different reasons. A CEO might be quite emotionally charged about the change and having it acted on quickly because he's had 3 months of conversations about this with his board of directors or her board of directors. And so her president might be saying, hey, I need this acted on. When are you going to get it done? The value of setting the parameters creates the openness for the conversation, creates the safety for the conversation, so that you can really feel comfortable in raising objections and concerns that have been raised by the team. The further you are up the chain from that frontline team, the less visibility you have of the obstacles and the pragmatic pitfalls that might be awaiting in the change initiative. And having that conversation where you first set the parameters enables you to bring those in without them being presented as a threat to the CEO. So she feels a lot more comfortable with where you're at.
Love that. Love that. We're going to start to wrap up in a second, but I wanted to ask Paulette to speak to something that she talks about in her book, and that is being a split assertive. And I think that's so important, Paulette, and so smart of you to bring that in, because we want to feel one way. We want to think, I'm confident, or I'm skillful, or I'm whatever. And it might be, I'm confident today. But if you ask me to go up in the plane and jump out, my confidence is gone. If you ask me to coach a group of leaders, I don't care what the subject is, I'm totally cool with that. I'm good. I am in my zone of genius. If you take me and even out on something, Patrick, like a sailboat, I'm like, I don't know anything about this. And all of a sudden, I'm not confident. So talk about, Paulette, this idea, because I want to give leaders a sense that it's okay. It's okay to be where you are and just recognize that and move forward from that point.
Okay, so split assertive. This reminds me of what Patrick said in a post recently. It's a technique called normalize and mutualize to make people feel that this is perfectly normal. So some people feel that, well, I'm assertive in this situation, but something might be wrong with me because I'm not assertive in this situation. I have no trouble speaking up to my boss at work, yet I can't speak up to my friends of 30 years. And what's wrong with me? Nothing's wrong with you. Normalize. This is perfectly normal. No one is assertive in all situations. Mutualize. I'm there. You're there. Patrick's there. Everybody experiences this. So again, no one is assertive in all situations. We have our strengths and our weaknesses. And we have the confidence, like you pointed out, to be confident, to be bold in certain situations, but not necessarily others. So when we recognize this, and when we recognize that this is normal, and that it's a mutually felt a feeling that many people have, we don't start to doubt ourselves and think there's something that must be wrong with us. It's just an absolute normal characteristic. And when we start to recognize what are the situations in which we do not have the confidence to be as assertive as we'd like, then we can work on those. And it doesn't have to happen immediately. It happens gradually. So self-awareness is everything, Rhonda. You spoke about it earlier. Being self-aware of your own feelings, your own expectations before you can begin to convey what needs to be conveyed to a group. Being self-aware of your own strengths, and I don't even want to call them weaknesses, areas that are not quite as strong, and what you want to focus on first. So we're all split assertives.
It's great that I'm in such wonderful company with other split assertives.
Exactly. That's normalize and mutualize, right, Patrick?
Exactly.
Well, I want to start to wrap up. And as we do, this has been a great conversation for me. I am actually going to go back and watch the replay on this so I can take away some of the nuggets that we've brought out. But I like to leave people with something to take away. This conversation was about next level leaders and giving them ideas, things that you can do to increase your results and effectiveness while still feeling good about your leadership life and the work that you do as a leader. So I'm going to ask you both for one key takeaway that a leader can use. So Paulette, I would like for you to speak to, what can I do? I'm a leader. I don't have quite as much confidence or assertiveness. Where can I start? What's something that I can do to begin to grow this in myself? And then Patrick, I'm going to ask you in a second to speak to one thing that I can do to be a more collaborative leader. I'm just starting this journey. I know I have an opportunity. I want to get better. What is something that you would recommend that I can do to just simply start becoming a more collaborative leader without going through all 6 steps of the process? So Paulette, to you first. What's that thing that I can do to become more confident and assertive as a leader?
Have faith in yourself. Begin with small steps. If you're not that confident, begin small. I always talk about steps so far outside of your comfort zone that you can't find your way back. Well, instead of stepping out of your comfort zone, let's just expand your comfort zone. So you stay in it, but you're expanding it. And that might give you a little bit more motivation and encouragement. Start by, this is a topic that permeates LinkedIn. Start by praising your employees. When's the last time you praised them for a job well done or their helpful nature in helping other team members be more productive and effective? Once you start to praise others, you will see how appreciative they are. Paying compliments is a highly assertive act, and we don't do it anywhere near as often as we should. You'll start to feel really good about yourself. Gee, I was assertive. I praised these individuals. Praise yourself, self-talk. A lot of psychological research is written about this. It helps people become more assertive. Think about your own strengths. Praise yourself. And you start to build confidence slowly so that you can then convey that confidence to others.
Thank you. I hadn't thought about showing praise as an assertive act.
Oh, absolutely.
So thank you for that. I will be definitely pondering that one. So Patrick, what can I do on my journey to become a more collaborative leader?
So I've spoken about setting the parameters for the conversation. The next most important thing after that is to listen to learn, not to respond. Interestingly, we can speak at about 100 to 150 words a minute. We can absorb, though, about 400 to 450 words a minute. When we are only speaking with one person, it becomes really easy to hear 3 or 4 words, know what they're going to say next, and start working on our courtroom response. Really, really detrimental to relationships, conversation, and problem solving. So listening to learn would be the next piece. And that really requires curiosity. That's really the foundation. It's that shift from judgment to curiosity that enables people to be collaborative. You can't get there without it. And and in that regard, pay attention to how often the word but shows up in conversations. If it's showing up frequently, there's not a lot of listening to learn happening. And that it doesn't make any difference whether it's the backyard but, or it's the boardroom but. However might sound more sophisticated, it's still but.
Love that. Thank you. Thank you both for those. I am hopeful that this gives our viewers something. For me, I think the piece that I would go to is my bucket of emotional intelligence. And again, to that piece of self-awareness. Know,
Self-awareness.
do the work to explore who you are and how you are showing up as a leader and what
Yes.
your impact is. So what does the research tell us? And why does this sound like such an easy thing? And it's not. It's difficult to have an increasing level of self-awareness. Research tells us that only 19% of leaders are truly self-aware. 19%, which means I think I'm great, I'm communicating, I'm collaborating, I'm confident. And if I went and asked a group of people the same questions about you, they probably go, nope, 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 nope. And so doing that work, that's a huge gap. And so as leaders, we can improve our effectiveness by closing that gap, narrowing that gap, being really self-aware, and then surrounding yourself with people that really help you foster some of the areas where, as you said, Paulette, you are not as strong. You don't need to be the only voice in the room with all the answers.
That's
Who
right.
else on your team can contribute that? So I think with that, I want to close. Any final words from either of you?
This was great. This was just great. And finally, so wonderful to meet you and see you while you were in your zones of genius and dropping those pearls of wisdom. Big difference in seeing you say it rather than just reading about it. So I'm so grateful to have this opportunity to learn from both of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to close with the words, what Paulette just said.
What she just said.
I think we should all close with what she just said. So everyone out there, if you have been watching, if you're watching on replay, like the video, share your comments, share the video with others. There's something in here that can probably serve someone else. So until we are able to be with you next time, we wish you a fantastic rest of your weekend. Paulette and Patrick, stay tuned for just a moment.